lot of X, right? You have CX, UX, IXD, a lot of definitions which maybe we need to have a common ground in terms of understanding. Secondly, we'll try to see if we can, like, do we really need a product design agency? Maybe you don't. Yeah, that's also a possibility, right? And if you do need, what are some of the considerations which you should have while selecting one? So looking at the definitions, right? So any experience that your end customer would have would start typically with maybe one interaction. Yeah, there will be one point of interaction. Maybe it might be a telephone call. There might be some touch point, maybe on your website, in a kiosk. There'll be one particular interaction that you would be having. Yes, that is a space which we call as the interaction experience. And when you design that one touch point, that typically is in the space of that interface, yeah, whatever interface that it might be. But customers don't end there. Their interactions would not just end at one interaction. It will be a series of interactions, which is typically a journey. Yeah, so if, let's say, they are getting onboarded or they are going about maybe trying to get a loan, there will be a series of interactions, and that will be a journey, and that's where we have the space called user experience, right? Which is typically designing the experience of all these touch points. Yeah. But even then, let's say again, going back to an example of a lending company, you have customers, like you have prospects first, then they become customers. After they become customers, again, there are series of interactions with the brand. Many journeys that they will take with you, right? And that is the space which we are looking at in terms of CX, which is the relationship experience. Now, all in all, like historically, typically the term that we typically understand about all the experiences that users have, we call that as UX, but in recent terms, UX has been kind of limited to the experience which users have with your product per se, right? So for this particular session, we'll be primarily talking about this intersection between business, design, and technology, and the importance of all three coming together to ensure that your user has a great experience. Now, what happens is typically you have a business interest, you have a certain goal to achieve. So what would you do? You would typically go and get a technology partner. Yeah? And you'll go about putting across a product, maybe an MVP, and taking it out to the market. It would be amazing in terms of it will be functional. Yeah? And many times when we speak to our clients, what we realize is that the product is out there, but no one is using it. There is something missing. There's something missing which the client is not very sure of, the technology team is not very sure of. Okay. There is also this case where business teams directly starts interacting with maybe a design agency. They'll start creating plans, amazing ideas, right? Revolutionary ideas. But the problem is you go to the technology team and late in the picture, and the technology team comes up and says, well, hey, you did your user research, you came up with a great idea, but it's not feasible. Or it is feasible, it will just take 6 months of effort, it will take 1 year of effort, and this is the cost. And the business says, well, we don't have those kind of budgets, so let's just remove these things, and then ultimately you get a more feasible product which may not be perfect for the end user. And finally, you have that side which is design and technology teams. They get into the groove, they get into a room, design an amazing product, yeah, but what you see is it's not becoming profitable. So right in the process, right in the beginning itself, it's important to get the key stakeholders right from business as well as design as well as technology together to ensure that you have an experience for the end user which is amazing, which is feasible, and which is also profitable for your business, right? And that's where getting all the three stakeholders together becomes very critical. So is even UX or user experience something which I need to be bothered about as a company, right? So some statistics, these are some interesting numbers which have been, we can see in certain research reports. This is as per Forrester Research Report in 2016, that for every $1 that you would invest in user experience, you would actually get a return of about $100 in terms of sales. Yeah, now that's the kind of returns that we're talking about as per a research report in 2016. And if you do a basic math on that, what is the ROI percentage? It's actually 9900%. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, and at the same time, these are not numbers that you should just go by. You could have, of course, every initiative that you take, there'll be a lot of influences. All these influences will matter, and your numbers will, of course, vary. And at the same time, this is just to understand that there is an impact when you are concerned about things which are not so tangible. Yeah. What is it that makes a user stick to your platform? Why do they come back to your platform again and again? And that really affects how you do repeat business with your users. This report, again, the same report says that better UX actually leads to 400% increase in conversion rates. Yeah. And 86% of users are actually ready to leave competitors or leave your brand and go to another brand purely for a better UX. Even if they have to pay more, they'll be ready for it. So there might be two products, two apps, identical in, let's say, the quality of, let's say, service. The product might be amazing, okay? But purely because, like, if you look at even investor platforms, right? You have Zerodha, you have Grow. You start looking at these platforms. There'll be, you have platforms which have been there for long. They've got a good reputation. They bring in results, yeah. But at the same time, a younger audience, which may not be, they are not really sure about the truth behind the results that they will ultimately get from a platform. They will first trust you purely because of the experience, the ease in which they are able to do their business through your platform. Yeah, and that is an advantage, like something like Grow, would be having versus maybe a more traditional or maybe a investor company which has been there, done that, right? So even for new players, the competitive advantage that typically they will get is primarily in the area of UX, and that brings in the customers. And if you just see the way Grow as a company has been growing, right? The way they're doing it, it's amazing. And one of the key gambles that they have done is investing in UX. This is another important cost factor that we should consider. Yeah, a lot of times when we speak to our clients, as I said, they would have already gone ahead. Maybe they're interacting with a technology partner. They would have published. They would have gone to the market. They want to test out how things are. Okay, but the thing is, the cost to change from design to development to after release is that the cost kind of multiplies. A $1 in design becomes $6 at coding, $15 during testing, and between $60 to $100 after the product is released. That's the amount of kind of investment that would be required later in the process versus actually investing in change right at the beginning. So invest in design that will ensure that you will reduce your costs later on. Yeah, and that's a huge saving. Yeah, so 1x versus 10x in development versus 100x after you release. This is another document back in 2012 which says that customers, your users, typically take 50 milliseconds to form an opinion. That's how quick someone takes to form an opinion about you. I remember one of the initial, like me and my colleague, we had gone for a client meeting. We went there and the client was like, well, where is the designer? And so we looked at each other and we were like, what? So we said, we were expecting someone with long hair and smell some, we should be smelling some cigarettes. When the designer walks in, the entire office should have been looking at them, but well, so we were expecting a designer to come along. And both of us, we were looking at each other and we told the client, well, we are designers. We are designers. But the thing is, it was a good insight. We did say, yes, we have one designer back in our office. We'll get him next time. Yeah, someone with long hair. Okay, but the thing is, it is true. Functionality, all that matters, but what people are actually impressed about is the impression, the first go. What your product might work, may not work, but impressions are set by how your product looks, how it feels, right? And 94% of users basically said that they perceived how good something is based on how it looked, not basis the content that it offered. Yeah, so this was a research done on on websites. This was trust and mistrust on online health sites. Yeah, so something as important as health, more than content, it was how it looked that mattered. Yeah, so products well designed, which basically leads to loyal users. Yeah, so it's easy to understand. Something is not so well designed, so your users would go to some other competitor, right? If you have a design which is based on research, what would it lead to? It would typically give you a competitive advantage because you will get to know that how can you position your brand, how can you position your product with respect to your competition. Yeah, and that you will only get to know when you do your research on ground. Then good UI typically gives you an 200% increase in conversion rates, and good UX gives you a 400% increase in conversion rates. And I think that's huge. And most of the time, when we look at products, it might be good. Like it might be like at the heart of it, the engine might be good. Okay, but if it's not usable, people won't come back to you. So I was trying to help you find your life partner. So you know this, right? So behind every successful, the formatting is all off in this brand. There is a top notch UX UI product. This is something which I think it's a given today. Yeah. So if you need a successful brand, ensure that your product is the best. Bad UX and UI, again, something which we all understand. It means lost revenues, negative reputation, and decreased customer loyalty. Now, a very important question. Do I actually need one? Yeah, maybe you already know it, right? You have an in-house